Good evening, good evening, good evening. Man, The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 6 is well, I'm already seeing the articles, guys. It's
Yeah.
saying women are taking charge this episode.
Yeah,
Women
dude.
are taking charge.
Taking
Listen to
charge.
listen to this excerpt. Tell me. So there are so many individual stories in this week's episode. That's hard to believe that there's only 2 more left. How will all these narratives merge into one? I kind of gotta ask that same question, if we're being honest. It's a very valid point they're making. From Numenos' former queen to the strong-willed Disa to the 2 Harfoots, this episode of Rings of Power had women figuring things out and taking charge.
I'll
So
definitely give you the Queen and Disa, but the Harfoots, they didn't do much this episode. I'm not gonna give them saying they took charge. because
Yeah,
they
I
didn't
think
do
they
anything.
were. I think they literally said, you know, we have to find our friend. I
that's
don't
that's
remember.
they gave some
I mean,
kisses, and then they're like,
some
let's
kisses.
make a difference, right?
And a little bit of lizard kisses, which was weird.
Oh gosh, that's so. The fact that they literally hit a beat, the filmmakers like made a beat with like the music change and everything to insinuate this is comical, this is humorous, you're supposed to laugh now, was so freaking cringy to me. This whole episode was so cringy to me, or incredibly disinteresting.
Mm-hmm.
And things like didn't even make sense. There were so many continuity issues with this.
From the opening, with Arondir jogging through the woods. Were you guys not laughing? That scene, just the way, I don't know what it was about his pace, if his strides weren't like long enough, or if he was trying to keep his outfit from falling apart, but he was like,
I'll be honest with you. I was like, oh, right off the bat, another Jackson trilogy callback, because they framed it in the woods as if it was like from the Fellowship of the Ring when they're running through the woods fighting the Uruk-hai. Like they literally made the atmosphere feel similar. And I was just like, man, this show does not know how to have an original thought or original creative expression. This show is literally anything that's like sort of creative or interesting in any capacity is kind of a ripoff of the Jackson trilogy.
Yeah.
Or a ripoff of something else. Like, this show has no original thoughts. The only original things it has is dull and boring and disinteresting and slanderous.
And the action was bad. I mean, he fights some orcs.
Yeah, the action was a little goofy today. Even the part that stuck out to me was when I'm slipping his name. The dwarf prince grabbed the king, and
Durin?
he grabbed
Durin
hand, and then he flew back, and it looked fake. Really,
it looked like wires.
Oh yeah, that looked really weird. I mean, I like the wire work. You know, I like a little bit of wire work, but it was like he grabs him, and then they cut, and then he's like. And then you sort of see his arm move, and then he falls across the room.
Look, I people got to stop saying I like the wire work. If you're seeing it and you're like, oh, wire work, then they did it wrong.
Yeah. Well, I like that they did that instead of like a CG Durin hitting the floor. It's a little tiny compliment, but it's not necessarily a thing that's good about the show.
My goodness.
That's what I noticed. The action was bad, especially in that fight against the orcs at the beginning. I didn't really understand what each move was intending to do. It was just like he moves and then orc dead.
It was intended to be extreme skill. That's what they were trying to communicate. And then he sheathes that sword like he's by himself. There's no one there to impress. And he's like he sheaves it in a split second with a loud thud, and so unnecessary. It comes across as cringe. Like,
I had an epiphany the other day. I was listening to a review of, I think, the fourth episode. The third episode where they come across the bridge. It's either the third or fourth. They come across the bridge and it's broken. And in the review, they were talking about all these different ways you could get across. And I remember in the books, in Lothlorien, they have wires between the trees, and the elves are so light and they just walk across wires.
Yes.
So could they not have, in any other story, shooting an arrow across the gorge and hitting a tree and using it to get over it makes sense. But for elves, light enough to stand on top of snow and on the top of grass, they could do that. Cross. It was a different episode, but still, it was something I remembered and something I wanted to mention.
That's a really good point. I mean, we see in the Fellowship of the Ring, Legolas was able to free stand on top of freshly fallen snow, right?
Yeah.
And that's book accurate. There's it's not that they're like light, but there's some kind of light-footed magic that that elves have.
Yeah.
And so we haven't seen any of that in the show, and there should have been. There's also the issue with the whole bridge being out. It doesn't make sense geographically. Now, I am a big fan of Tolkien and Middle-earth. I'm a big fan of it. I have not studied the maps in great detail. I understand the basic layout of the Middle-earth map, but I've watched Nerd of the Rings. He doesn't, at this point, if you check out some of his videos, he's stopped trying to make sense of where they are and how how they're traveling, because it doesn't make sense. It's like the people who wrote the story and the geographical locations for these scenes had no concept of what the map of Middle-earth looked like.
I think I heard somebody say that geographically that bridge is where the Buckleberry Ferry is.
Okay.
Like right around that area. And I was like, okay.
Near Bree?
Yeah.
All right. It's such a weird way off. It's crazy to me that there's even this concept of the far travel in literal scenes, like scenes pass and then long travel.
If they were to travel nonstop, it would take them about 15 days.
Right.
On reasonably, if they were just to run nonstop.
Honestly, the show would have been better if more things happened with characters separate from each other, but staying in a general vicinity. That would allow, essentially, for stories to be told. But half of the show is an unspecified amount of time has passed, and characters went from one geographical area to another that was extremely far away, right?
So, we talked a lot about this last week, and I was just kind of, do you guys want to touch on what we kind of were talking about off the episode with, like, you were saying about timeline of things?
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of nail it down because they don't give you an accurate reading of how far away everything is. I mean, in the last season, Galadriel makes a nonstop ride from Mordor essentially to Eregion, which shouldn't be possible without killing a couple horses. And then
let's pull up the map just to reference it occasionally if we need to. Okay.
The big one that people are talking about is Eregion and Khazad-dûm. Because it seems like they're just going back and forth between these places willy-nilly. I believe that the trip should take about 3 to 4 days. And they're essentially doing it in one. So a trip that should take 3 to 4 days, they're taking a casual stroll over. It's like they live across the river. That's almost how they're treating it,
as they say.
They're almost treating it like, in this episode, Anatar leaves Eregion, which is secretly under siege. It hasn't started yet, but he leaves Eregion, goes over there, and then comes back to Eregion, seemingly in the same day.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, including not Gandalf, and Bombadil. They're like at Tom's place, and then he's like find a staff in the literally the next scene, and I don't know if that's in Tom's backyard or if it's like totally in a different area. We don't really know. It's literally the next shot.
So, if we're to take it a little bit episodically,
yes,
we don't have to talk about each and everything. But Celebrimbor is going crazy. I don't know how that helps Sauron necessarily.
I don't think it does.
But he's going crazy. I would say maybe it helps a little bit later, but
he's being corrupted by the rain.
Yeah, he's being corrupted. And then I think one good thing, they show that the assistant is worried, and to assuage her worries, Sauron walks up to her and he touches her hands. And they've kind of established he needs to be there with you, physically touch you to infect you, kind of. So at least they're sticking with that, that he's going to probably be influencing her. And then we get the magic crown reveal.
Morgoth's crown.
Morgoth's crown.
And Galadriel sees it and she goes, oh, Morgoth's crown.
Yeah. Yes. And do you guys want to bet that should the show continue, along with probably some mithril, this crown will be melted down into the One Ring?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You think?
I think so, because it's he said it's, it's still powerful. It's still has, like, power from the Silmarils.
Hold on. Okay. As far as I know, there's no significance to Morgoth's crown. Correct?
Yeah.
I have not heard any lore of any kind or read anything from the books or in the appendices that I can recall that Morgoth's crown has any significance of any power that was tied in with Morgoth. Zero.
Here's the thing.
Why are they trying to explain with all of this added BS?
I don't mind the addition of Morgoth's crown. The issue is the lore is already so full of things. Even in the appendices, it's already full enough of the stuff that they have access to that they don't need to add something like the crown.
There's plenty here. There's plenty here to pull from. Well, it's like 200 pages.
I mean, they have to be careful. They can't pull everything because, they can't steal
what
from
they're doing.
They don't own. They're not allowed to use.
True, but
look, they have access to the whole trilogy. But since they're talking about in the Second Age, they have to pull from the appendices, which is where the history is told in some capacity.
What did you guys think of the White City? What was the city they showed us very briefly? The men.
Numenor?
That's no, no, they were showing us
Eregion. They didn't show us Minas Tirith. Minas Tirith.
You might have thought White City because they show the Numenorian city from above, and it looks like Minas Tirith.
That's what I'm bringing up. It's very reminiscent of Peter Jackson's version, showing and everything.
I think that was in season 1.
Season.
They did that because it's the Numenorians that come to Middle Earth and they establish Gondor and Minas Tirith, the White City. And so they're like, okay, let's model it after Minas Tirith from the Jackson trilogy.
So things have to look
similar, right? Because they would have, in theory, at least Rings of Power ideas, is that they would build it, Minas Tirith, to resemble what was in Numenor. But that's all I believe it's all kind of just hearsay, right?
Let's see. They do the Numenorian prison scene after he snaps her in. After Adar snaps in
Galadriel.
He snaps her cuffs together. They show Numenor. They have the trial. It's pretty weak sauce.
Yeah, and so here's a point that I really would like to make. especially with Numenor, but kind of across the whole show, but especially with Numenor because they have so much screen time. This is supposed to be like the big Game of Thrones moment, right? Mm-hmm. There's been a takeover of the throne, a usurping of the throne, in fact, and the people who are loyal to the original lineage are being persecuted and being forced to bend the knee or die, right? So we're focusing in on Elendil. This is supposed to be a big moment, like where we're supposed to care about Miriel and Elendil and his daughter and all these people's relationships, like we might have seen from Game of Thrones. However, I don't give a crap about any of these characters or anything that happens in Numenor because it doesn't feel like a real place, and we haven't had sufficient time to build likability, to build intrigue, to see yourself in these characters. And they're doing all of these moments, but it's literally, it's like, you know, it's like, remember the very first film, right? It was just a picture of a horse, like, you know, doing this, and it was just on this spin. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was light and shapes that were going in front of light. There was nothing entertaining or emotionally drawing for that. It was just visuals doing something, right? That's what this show feels like, and that's what the whole Numenorian narrative feels like. There's no investing at all. Like I was saying before we started, I feel way more, and still not a lot because it's all very convoluted, but I feel way more invested in seeing if Anatar Sauron actually successfully gets his rings made.
Yeah, you know? It's more how. I just kind of want to see how.
But I'm more invested in that story than I am this whole narrative that takes up screen time with Numenorians. And I would be like, why not just ignore Numenor and spend a lot of time with the elves and Anatar to have these rings made, and do a whole show about Numenor where you stay consistent with what's in the book and spend real time to get to know these characters, because they're doing what Game of Thrones wanted to do, have all of these characters, all of these narratives, and you just care about all of them, but they're not good enough storytellers to do that, because I don't care about a single character in the show.
Agreed.
I'm sorry to go on a rant, but I just, this is so frustrating to week after week to invest our time into watching this garbage. And it's not like 30 minutes like freaking The Acolyte was. Yeah. We have to drudge through an hour of dull, non-interesting characters that just frustrates you, cringes you out, or puts you to sleep. You know, that's the whole show.
Moments in this.
A lot.
Hey, there's a couple people watching right now. We're doing a live on purpose. We want to hear what you guys have to say about this.
Right. If you have seen the episode, share.
Well, not even just this episode, because you guys might not have seen it yet. It just came out today. What do you think about previous episodes? We can talk about that too. I know we're primarily talking about today's episode, but yeah. What do you guys think?
Let's get through a couple more parts of the episode. So I think probably the section I have the most notes about, even though it's a relatively small section, is the Tom Bombadil section. After the easy snap cuffs, I have a couple of stuff here. So he mentions the secret fire.
Yeah.
A couple times he mentions the secret fire.
Right. Secret fire.
Wielding the secret fire.
This is the freaking not Dan and David. My goodness.
Everything that he says feels very like cryptic, but yet like not good cryptic. It's like it's like nonsensical. I see that light and it is glowing with passion.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's like,
it doesn't make sense. Now, almost every line, Bombadil is a big offender of this because they're trying to make this character feel ancient, but this whole show is full of nonsense word salads. That's what this whole show is. It literally, these fancy phrases don't mean a dang thing.
There's a couple times there where the camera zooms in and he says something like it's supposed to have weight. None of the lines have weight. They have one where he's like, he's like, "Where are we going?" And it like zooms in on him as he puts on his hat, and he's like, "You're just gonna follow old Tom." And I was like, "What?"
Well,
what
that shot was the moment of the revealing of the wizard hat. That was the significance
he's got a
of
wizard
that
hat.
shot.
Mhm.
That's
Anyway,
again, this show is full of it's full of Easter eggs. Like, it's either full of just attempt at fan service visually, but like they're telling their own story without sticking to the lore. And the lore from the books is Easter eggs. Like we already mentioned, the locations and the time passing are so inconsistent. I mentioned this last week. I'll say it again. The time in the books of the Rings of Power being made was over 50 years.
50 years.
This is like they made the rings in we don't really know how long.
Maybe a month.
No, it's not even a month, because if you go off of like the Eregion story, it's like a month. But if you go off of like the supposed to be linear time passing, you go off of like Poppy and Nori in the desert of Rune. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's just a couple days. But what we're seeing in Eregion could be a few months. It's all so incredibly convoluted, and it doesn't make sense linearly.
So I have that. Then I have a little bit for the Harfoots. It's halting. I hate the dialogue. The show is horrible for the music cues. Music cues for everything. Building music for scenes that are nothing dialogue, and haunting music for scenes.
Sauron putting his head down and
Sauron, but always musical cues.
The stupid musical cue with the kiss, right?
Yeah,
it's like we're silly.
Why are they doing just to have them talking, have them kissing, and then have the two of them together. They're having a conversation, and the music's like building.
Yeah.
And she's like, I guess we need to like fight back or something. And I was like, can we not have the music for this conversation? It would feel more real.
Yeah.
And then, then we get to the trees. Then we get to Bombadil and Gandalf at the trees.
And staff.
We get some beautiful dialogue where Tom Bombadil says, maybe there are some bad people that deserve to live and some good people that deserve to die. It's just actual Gandalf dialogue.
No, so what it is, it's a rephrasing of the very famous line from the book that was repeated in the Jackson trilogy word for word, which is when Frodo is talking to Gandalf about the pity Bilbo had on Smeagol, right? On Gollum. And he says, don't be so quick to dish out death and judgment, right?
Yeah.
And that was the foundation of this stupid Bombadilism, which was basically like, he was talking about he wants to save Nori, and then he's like, well, some good people die and some bad people live. Who are you to dish out what happens there? You know what I mean?
I want to say that Gandalf says that exact thing. That there are some, there are some that live that maybe deserve to die, and some that die that deserve to live.
I don't know.
I'm going to say he has that exact piece of dialogue.
The first thing I thought was the conversation he had with Frodo. Don't be so quick to deal out death and
judgment. And I believe he says that right after.
It's possible it's in the same scene. I have to rewatch the Jackson trilogy or read the book to see when that was. But yeah, you're probably right. It's probably in there. I'm just not remembering exactly where. But this was it was so quirky in not a good way, this scene. And so he's on Gandalf, the stranger, is on a quest to find his staff and learn the wielding way. Essentially.
Yeah.
He can't be a wizard without learning the wielding way. And I knew this, it was obvious from the trailer, but the only way they were like, oh, so Gandalf is dumb. He has to become wise in some fashion. We want to bring Tom Bombadil into the story. The only way to do that makes sense for the story that we've made up is to like, let's have Bombadil out in the desert of Rune, right? Freaking
teach him.
teach Gandalf how to be Gandalf instead of Gandalf being a Maiar who comes to Middle Earth with a very specific mission that he's driven by, right? To be a prophet, to sway the people away from Sauron. And the fact that they brought in Gandalf as this character who doesn't know what his purpose is so incredibly dumb. It's so stupid.
We were talking about off before we started recording. This part specifically with Gandalf and Tom Bombadil felt very short. And I wanted more of it, even though we know in maybe the next episode we'll see more. Excuse me.
Yeah, right.
I think I want. We were talking about off screen. Why are they showing us so much of each character, like such a small portion of it? Why can't we just see a good bit of Gandalf and Tom, and then that be the episode, or even them and one other character, and
I have a pretty good theory.
Not show us such a short bit of what they're doing to not really even get anywhere.
I mean, I have a good theory as to why they're doing this, and I already said it. It's because they want to do something like Game of Thrones did. They want to have a bunch of characters in their story that they can bounce around to, right? Because Game of Thrones did it, and so they want to do it. The problem with that is they don't have the skill or the understanding to be able to write a scene that draws you in to be invested into a character or a series of scenes. So they waste time with these boring, not well-written scenes that ultimately makes everything fall flat. If these scenes were written better for these characters, we might be more invested even with short, not very much screen time.
Yeah, but how much we gave House of the Dragon a lot of praise and Game of Thrones a lot of praise, but our downfall for that show is there's way too much stuff going on. Give us less stuff.
No,
I mean, I'm almost positive that we've said that over and over again when we did House of the Dragon.
No, I've never said I want less stuff happening. The only critique I said is I wish they wouldn't have blue-balled us with the end of this specific episode. Or what I like about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon is that they're able to write a story that feels like a vast world with a lot of characters, but they do it in an effective way for you to feel invested in all of these characters. This show doesn't, these writers don't know how to do that. They're trying to do that and they don't know how.
Quick aside, the quote is, "Many that live deserve death. Some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment."
There it is. Yeah.
He says that almost verbatim.
Almost verbatim.
And then we switch from Lord of the Rings to Star Wars. He says, "Nori or your destiny." Right? He's like, "Are you gonna go save your friends, or are you gonna stay here and train?"
Yeah, that's a Yoda right there.
That's a Yoda thing. That's Yoda. That's Luke and Yoda.
They wanted to make Tom like a wise mix of a pre-Gandalf character mixed with Yoda, right?
Yeah, and so now Gandalf Skywalker has to train and find his lightsaber and choose between his friends or his destiny. Will he be able to defeat both Lord Vaders, one in the east and one in the west?
There is always two.
Yeah, there's always two, a master and an apprentice.
There's a master
the rule of two. Thank you.
The two towers, if you will.
Two towers. And so I guarantee you he will find his staff. He'll find a stick. He won't be sure. He'll have a vision of Nori fighting off the Shy Guys, and that's a Mario reference for those of you who aren't familiar, though. And then he'll run off. Well, he'll be like, "I know I'm disobeying Tom Bombadil by running off and saving my friends," but Tom will be up on the hill and he'll be like smiling and nodding as he sees him running off in the distance. Like
destiny.
I
Destiny
knew
rewritten.
He's like it. That's his destiny.
Yeah.
And then he'll whistle and hum and walk away.
Is that before or after he has to use the force to lift his aircraft out of the water?
He's running around. He's running through that forest with Tom Bombadil on his back.
Touch me by my size, too.
How much you guys want to bet that none of those trees that Tom brought him to are going to be what he pulls the staff from? It's going to be that freaking tree by the smiles by the halfling thing.
Oh, you think by the halflings?
I think he's going to get his staff from that freaking tree.
That's pretty good. Next part, dwarves be delving.
they're trying,
deep, dog.
They're trying to delve, but there's bats in the way.
There's going. Well, hold on. Yeah, no spoilers yet. They're going far down, getting all the golden gems and dumping it in piles at their king's feet. You guys remember The Hobbit?
Yeah.
You guys remember
the piles of gold?
The piles of gold.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Let's not acknowledge the fact that in The Hobbit there's a mountain of gold because that's what dragons do, and so they create a mountain of gold to live on top of.
Well, he had piles of gold. Thrain,
the dragon, or the dwarf?
No, Thrain had piles of gold.
Did he?
Around. Yeah, they're just piles of gold.
I mean, when the Arkenstone was corrupting his mind. When the Arkenstone is corrupting his mind.
Just and same here. He's getting.
It's like when your mind starts getting corrupted, you start piling your gold up.
Piling up your riches. You start throwing gold in piles.
Did you guys notice as soon as Durin number 2, as soon as it shows the shot of the gold being piled, it pans up and shows the king. It's all being piled at his feet. Then Durin walks in the room with the dudes behind him. There's no gold on the floor in front of the throne.
It's a switch. It's a time switch. They're clearly showing that this was happening, and then they cleared the gold out, swept it all up.
It's a continuity error. Dude.
I actually missed that.
It's a continuity error.
I didn't notice that.
I just assumed that was happening later.
But they do it right back to back.
So yeah, Anatar is there. And he's wanting Mithril, and the king is withholding it. And I will say, I thought it was cool that Anatar looks over at the flames, and you see the Balrog appear. I thought it was cool.
Of course,
all right.
It's a freaking.
It's a member berry. Okay,
it's a member berry
for having one little thing that I enjoyed in this episode. I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it was a little bit. I thought the idea was a little bit cool.
I like
and what it does is it's actually a brief bit of storytelling. Is it implies that Anatar has a feeling of what's going on in the mountain. He looks over, the Balrog appears, and only for him, and he's like, "Oh, I know what's going on. They're delving." And they're going to delve too deep. And he has essentially a brief vision of what could happen. I don't mind that. I thought that was a nice little itty bitty bit of show, don't tell.
I don't have a problem with it. It just
it was kind of cool.
It just seems in the mix of this garbage, everything just makes me roll my eyes. Now, I will say, I already said it last week. I enjoy freaking this actor. I didn't like him as Halbrand. I like him as Anatar.
I like him as Anatar. He's pretty good.
Anatar, he works. He actually conducts himself. He's the only one in the show that looks around, makes eye contact, holds himself like he's an actual elf. He's the only one in the show that seems
his
wig
like looks a little goofy to me.
Look, I understand.
For an elf looks goofy.
I understand.
People were saying, oh, it looks like he just got so much forehead with that wig. If you go back and look at him, he's got a pretty receded hairline. It's pretty high up with his normal hair. And then they switch his regular natural brown hair to straight elven hair, and it's much more distinct on him.
Yeah,
it's a very clear difference.
It also folds back. It's not like down.
I think it's okay. It's at least it's long hair. He's the only one who looks like an elf, in my opinion.
Look, similar to last. I don't I don't want to jump forward too much, but similar to last week, where he has a conversation with Celebrimbor, and I felt something coming from Annatar as a character. Like I felt the genuine deception, but the skill that he had, it actually felt like good acting, right, in the show. And then in this episode, where he does the illusion trick with Celebrimbor and he's outside imploring him to continue the work, I felt the same. There's something this actor has an ability to have evil behind his eyes while still communicating this form of deceptive innocence. And it works. That's what I'm saying. This actor does a good job as Annatar, not Halbrand. And also, like, when he's alone trying to be evil, it's a little cringy to me. But when he's pretending to be Annatar, I think it works.
This episode, there was a lot of, the superhero walk away as they're like, up on his face, and he's like,
and he's smiling, he's doing his evil face, doing evil sorrow face.
Grin. There was a lot of that in this episode, like 3 times.
So the Doran gets slapped by his dad when he's like, take off the ring, prove that you're not its slave, right? And he's like, no, who am I don't have to answer to you. Then we get the full entire assassination of Doran 3's character. He and Disa are sitting there, and I was okay with him sitting there being like just shell-shocked. What's going on? Okay, like that? My dad is he's gone, right? And then he starts crying, and his wife is like, "Let's fight. Let's lay in front of the tunnel, right?" And I was like, "Come on,
laying in front of the tunnel." I swear, that's like,
I know
that's like what Save the Tree protesters do. They
that's what it feels like when they say. But her logic made sense. It's like when he sends the guards to arrest his son, then the people will see that he's not in his right mind, that this is not their king. Yeah. Like the logic makes sense. It should be coming from Doran. It shouldn't be coming from Disa.
He's like, and how could you talk about him like that?
And I don't mind like this kind of emotionality for this character, but he has been, they've really just kind of destroyed his character. And I think he's a great actor. I really like his scenes, but they're giving all the good stuff to Disa and making him just cry.
Yeah.
It does feel like Disa is his conscience, and the only way that he can process it and figure out what the next thing is to have a conversation with Disa. And it's like, when I was watching it, I felt like all I was thinking was like, this feels like I'm sitting in on a weird marriage. Like it doesn't feel like it kind of fits in there. It's like I'm getting more of their marriage, and it's like, why am I even seeing this?
Well, this show, at least when it comes to Under the Mountain, similar to The Sea, Disa is always right. You know what I mean? Similar to that. And if she's not right, it's because there's some evil afoot. You know,
Doran says in almost a perfect Ace Ventura replication of Scotty from Star Trek. He says, "I can't do it." I mean, it's spot on the way Ace Ventura. I can't do it, Captain. I don't have the power. Perfect. I can't do it. Then we switch back to Numenor.
My goodness,
real quick.
The most dull.
And we got one line I liked. I like when characters that are supposed to be heroic act like heroes. Elendil says, "Faith is not faith unless it's lived." And I was like, all right, that makes sense. He's one of the faithful. He's following his code, and I like that sentiment.
Well, basically, it's like similar. It was done better in Game of Thrones, but it's like the whole thing where I took a vow until death. I'd rather die than break my vow because I don't want to be like the Kingslayer. You know, I don't want to live a life where I am a traitor and an oath breaker. Right. That's the message they're trying to communicate. That's what I said. They're doing a Game of Thrones,
and it's I thought it was all right. It was brief. And then his daughter tries to convince him to.
Oh, we're totally not on the dwarves anymore.
We're coming back. Oh, don't worry, we're coming back.
We're all over the place.
The sea is always right, he says to Muriel. Oh, well, right after he says, if the Valar judge me to be worthy.
Yes.
Then he says the sea is always right. So which one is it? Who do you worship? The sea or the Valar?
I mean, then we get, obviously.
Then we get the sing fighting and the bats.
Yeah. This is so cringy.
You guys remember the giant bats? Remember in The Hobbit? Remember the giant bats?
Sure, yeah.
Big.
They're forgettable, but
don't the goblins ride the giant bats?
Yeah. These are big ones. Yes. Remember?
Not big enough to hold a dwarf.
This is so cringy. And look, Wyatt, I believe you said you don't hate the concept of the magical singing to understand the mountain. You don't dislike that.
If some rocks had crumbled in front of this path, I'd have been like, good. But magic tracks.
The way
I don't know. I think the exact opposite. As much as it was cheesy, the bats, I was thinking in my head while I watched this. I was like, rocks falling, I'm gonna be upset. And then bats, I was like, okay, I'll accept the bat.
The magic is established as clearly affecting the mountain, right? And the stone and resonance, Mm-hmm. So if she sings and she's resonating with bats who use, frequencies and resonances themselves, should they not be like attacking her?
Kind of.
Well,
I don't understand.
I don't see it as
she tell the bats
magic calling the bats. It was to me, it was she was saying, and that kind of spooked the bats into flying at them.
Well, no, because they established the magic of the singing affects the mountain, right? So that's why I expected maybe something to open up in a lava flow to kind of cut across the path. I expected the mountain to react to her singing rather than the bat.
Slow down the dig. Have a collapse of a tunnel. You know what I mean?
If a tunnel opened up and bats flew out of that, I feel like I'd have been more okay with it.
And if she had to jump out of the way,
and if she had to, you do a barrel roll. Something.
To get out of the way to let the bats attack the.
Maybe I would have accepted a barrel roll.
Bats chase away the other dwarves. Then Durin comes out and he's like, "I love you."
I love you. And then she said, "You can love me later." And I was like, "Ew."
He's just standing there with an axe or a hammer or something.
They're freaking just made me her doing everything. Love making, man.
I was totally expecting. Oh, I also love. They walk up and she's like facing the opposite direction. Has to turn around dramatically.
She doesn't.
And then almost hits the Dune song.
I know.
Oh, it's very close. She said, "Ah!" I was like, there it is. It's almost there.
You almost got it. But no, the whole singing thing. It's. I don't hate the idea. I would have approached it in a creative way different than be like, stand there and just kind of like projectile sing. Like I wouldn't have done that. I would have done something that was a little bit less visually for the, like, as far as performance goes, because when you going that hard, if the actor's not very aware of social norms and social conditioning, it can come off as cringy. And so
it was cringe.
What I would say is like, stop trying to just do this opera singing for the mountain. Freaking like do something where you like touch the wall so you get like a vibration of some sort.
Yeah.
And then you like start like maybe like and then let the vibrations of the mountain amplify it naturally than just being like a forced opera kind of thing.
Opera all the time. I would have liked her to do a couple. You establish the singing magic. I would have liked her to do a couple different things with her voice. I'd have liked to hear a little bit of you know,
bass, like we go
a
down.
bass. I'd like to hear a falsetto, maybe a little bit of throat singing, where she hits one of the.
Oh no, not throat singing, not throat singing, not throat
I just
singing.
feel like
You don't want the throat.
if there's different tones in the mountain, wouldn't you use all sorts of different methods of using your voice, which is part of your magic? I don't know.
She trained her whole life to do this.
She trained her whole life.
Dwarves live a long time.
They do.
They live a long time.
Real quick, let's kind of, we got to get through this. The Numenorians, they toss Muriel into the sea. She
also freaking. Let's just say this. Look. Let's not gloss over this. Stolen valor.
Yeah,
you know,
stolen valor.
Stolen valor from a good, strong male character.
You're close. Stolen valor, by the way.
Yeah. I was this close. Dang
you're
it.
Very close. Stolen valor.
Thanks for pulling me across the finish line.
I think Elendo would have been judged
8.
Innocent. No, I think he'd have been innocent. He's good. He's living the faithful life. And she comes out. The Numenorians are so easily swayed by birds and stuff. They're just like, she's the queen. The queen of the sea.
Wasn't literally a few seconds ago they were like, we're not going to execute Elendo for being loyal to this gal. They were like, no.
They were cheering. And she was like, I'll take his place. They were like, yeah, do it. And now they're like, she's the queen.
Yeah, queen. Muriel. Tom Muriel.
And I guess I'm okay with the sea creature making a judgment call here. Looking at the playbook, being like, "I,
what sea creature is this? Because I don't know any sea creatures.
I mean,
it's the sea creature. All right?
Middle Earth has sea creatures.
Yeah, it's got tons of sea creatures.
There is in the book, I believe, especially around Numenor, examples of creatures attacking ships. However, it's not this.
It's okay.
Public execution by sea creatures, not a part of
death by sea creature.
Kind of weird.
It's almost literally the Kraken.
Yeah. It's got
in Wrath of the Titans, you know, where they like hold the princess up and the Kraken comes up. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Stolen artwork.
So out in Eregion, they have no idea there's orcs out in the woods. They're just xenophobic. They never leave. They also don't have any farms or anything around this city. It's because they don't need any food or milk or bread or meat or anything.
They're orcs.
So nobody knows that there's orcs literally across the river.
Too bad they didn't have a singer who could just pick up on that.
Right, exactly. Or send some bats. We get the scene, like you mentioned earlier, where Celebrimbor
does voodoo magic.
He goes outside and boom, it's all beautiful. It's nice. He's like, I'm going to go. I got to tend to my city. And Anatar's like, no. And they're being mean to each other.
Cut his hand.
After he cut his hand. And then he comes outside and it's beautiful. And Anatar comes out. And oh, man.
It's beautiful out
here. He convinces him with, dude, it's so beautiful out here.
So perfect.
We finally... The show gives us some elves doing elf stuff, being majestic,
sewing things, going in a
little bit of needlework,
needlework. Yeah, taking their time because they're not in a hurry. Elves.
I mean, they were a little bit janky looking, but there was some elves doing like some art.
Look, I if you say janky looking with this show, everybody's janky looking. Everyone's busted up vegans,
but they look like an elf society. That was fun.
They were doing elvish things and moving at an elf's pace.
Sure.
That's what we saw.
It was good enough. It felt right, like for the magic. Anatar says some very interesting things. He says these everybody will forget about the Silmarils.
That's a pretty good point.
Yeah. He says, but these rings that you've created, the
Silmarils will pale in comparison.
He says they're precious.
Yeah. Well, that's the second time he says precious.
He says they're precious creations.
Yeah. The first time Anatar said precious is when he was in Khazad-dûm with the Dwarf King, and he said, or would you do, like when he was offering the wood for the delving deeper?
Yeah.
And he was like, or would you prefer, like, would you rather something more precious? Right. So he used the term precious there. He uses it again.
Every time
I didn't catch that at all.
Every time they use the word precious in this show, first season, second season, it is on purpose. Go back to when at the fire scene with Elendil or Isildur and Astrid, where he's telling her about his mom, and she says, "Oh, she was precious to you." It's another one. It's all on purpose.
Yeah, precious is not a word that you just throw in there without intention.
They do it once in the Hobbit movies.
Yeah,
one time.
Look, and this is another thing.
It works because it's a dragon and it's cool.
And he's referring to the ring because the dragons have a connection with gold, and he sensed the one golden ring in Bilbo's pocket. He sensed the precious nature of it.
I don't know if it was necessarily that. I think he was sensing the power that the ring had over Bilbo, which was similar to what a horde does to a person or a dwarf or a dragon.
Well, the reason
the ring has the same sway over a person that entire horde has over an individual. That's how he can sense it. It's that powerful.
Well, are you talking about Smaug?
I'm talking about Smaug.
Well, look, this is what I'm saying is the reason Smaug came south from the north to Middle Earth, right? Is because of the power of the ring in the world was growing, and dragons are drawn by gold and dark and basically dark magic, like evilness, evil dark power growing. And so Smaug was drawn from the north to the south. And usually the south or the Middle Earth doesn't typically have dragons, but there was one, Smaug, that came. So, yeah, I mean that it works 100% that Smaug would sense the ring and the dark power mixed with the fact that it's a golden ring. I think it works perfectly.
Can we go back to this episode?
We gotta wrap it up.
Everything kind of turns, and they're at war. Is that real? Or I was confused there.
Can we also acknowledge that Adar played Galadriel like a fiddle?
Everybody does.
She's so stupid. She's supposed to be the wisest. Like the next to Sauron, the oldest, technically maybe the second oldest, and the most cunning, wisest character. And right now, freaking a dude is smarter. Like Elendil is smarter than Galadriel. Like people are just playing her like a dang fiddle, man.
He has more class. He's more heroic, Elendil is. And that's saying something because I don't care for his character. He's acting in accordance with the type of character that he is. And it's not terrible. She's just terrible to watch. She doesn't seem likable. She doesn't seem interesting.
This show has 2 episodes left this season. All right. That means we are about 2 seasons deep of a public execution of one of the most beloved, high status characters in all of Tolkien's writing. The Lady Galadriel, of Lothlorien. The fact that she is such an unlikable, moody teenager that anybody who tells her a lie for 5 seconds can just manipulate her to their whims, and for her to give up all the information, and for Sauron to literally get her to keep her secret, even though she's supposed to be like wanting revenge on Sauron for killing her brother. Like she's just doing the bidding of anybody who wants to use her.
Yeah.
Like she gets captured and she gets used, and she just lets it happen. It's such a public execution of what is in the books and in the Jackson trilogy, an amazing, very powerful, wise being, right?
Yeah. Nobody's asking for her hairs.
No, Gimli don't want none of them hairs.
And I will say there's a couple times in the show where they make a point, you can tell with the filmmaking, to make her hair specifically look almost like it's glowing. They have light from behind shining on it.
Yes.
There's a couple times in Linden where that's the case. It doesn't work. She's not of the right, height and disposition that Galadriel's supposed to be.
Yeah, she's short.
And think it just for production reasons. Think of the care that Jackson did with his movies. Like the Lady Galadriel, she's like the second oldest elf. Okay, in by the time the third age gets around, and the end of the second age, which is like here, and in the Jackson trilogy, they literally like catch lights on production for filmmaking are little spots of light that are in the eyes. It's what causes people to look like they have life. If you want to make someone look dead on pictures or in a show, it's like black out their eyes and not let them have like a little speck, the little soul of light. In the Jackson trilogy, they'd have like a rig that had like 20 to 30 little lights.
A bunch of them.
So when they showed it at her catch lights were like, it looked like stars. There was a bunch of catch lights.
Awesome.
And that's how much care the Jackson trilogy put into her character based on how the book describes her. Because the book describes her as if she has stars, like a galaxy or the night sky was in her eyes, right? So they took care to do that. Where everyone else had a single catch light, she had a sparkle of catch light.
This version just kind of is scowling all the time. She always kind of looks like this.
Just a moody teenager, man.
She looks like all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not intimidating. It's not interesting. There's nothing about her that's super likable.
There's nothing likable about Galadriel.
And I don't know. So the episode ends with the orcs attacking. I love that they made a huge deal in like promotional stuff about the troll.
Yeah.
Where's this troll? We've seen him once, the Mike Ehrman troll.
Yeah.
Where is he at? What's he doing?
I guess he might show up in the battle in the next episode.
I really thought, because they said, oh, he's supposed to be like Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad. I was like, okay, so Adar's going to be sending him out to do dirty work and stuff and get stuff done because he's like powerful troll.
Yeah, this is the first kind of battle scene, and it wasn't even really that we've seen in this show so far, and we only have 2 episodes.
We have to wait another week for an actual battle. They said this is going to be the season of battles. You know what I mean? That's what they said. There's so much battling. This is what the fans have been looking for. We had to do a lot of setup. Now we're going to do a lot of payoff with the season. There's going to be battles. There's going to be intrigue. There's going to be evil being highlighted. Like the things are going to be happening. We got 2 episodes left, and we're just starting the first battle.
When I got on to Amazon to watch this episode, I was like, wait a minute, this can't be episode 6. And then I counted, I was like, wait, we've done 3 weeks and then 2. And this is episode 6. And I was like, wait a minute, nothing's happened. We have 6 episodes and nothing has happened really, except for
they got these rings.
But that could have literally what they showed us could have been all in one episode. And then everything else just felt like fluff for 6 episodes.
Yeah.
It is just fluff. And again, it comes down to quality of writing. And this is the point I want to make. Like, when it comes to what is a story good or bad? Like, everyone says that whether you like or dislike something, whether something is good or bad, it's all left up to the opinions of the viewer. It's subjective, right? And I'm sorry that there is a vast scope of opinions and subjectivity. But when something is just bad, it's just bad. There's no apologizing for it. So like if you sit here and you're like, I like the Rings of Power, or you sit here and you're like, I like the Acolyte, I would be willing to bet that if you just took a few minutes to actually pay attention and not be scrolling on your phone while you're watching the show, you would actually discover you don't like this show. It's actually very boring or dull or stupid. Like, it's just not well written.
Here's the thing. You're not going to be, you might watch it once.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any watching this again.
It's not. There's no.
The people that enjoy this are gonna watch it once and be like, "Yeah, I enjoyed it." That's it. There's not gonna be any fandom. There's not gonna be any kind of rewatch stuff. There's not gonna be anything that we've seen from famous shows in times past.
Look, people like the reality show Below Deck more than they like this show. Like people will binge Below Deck, and the people that watch the show who like it are barely watching it. You know what I mean? Like they're barely watching it. They're not caught up. We know from the numbers from the first couple episodes from the first season to this season, it was like a 60% drop off. And now, even from just the first 3 or 2 episodes of the second season to the 5th and now 6th season, it is a major drop off of just that viewership. So we are getting to like a few 100,000 people are watching this show within the first week of it being out. You know what I mean? For the new episodes. And this is supposed to be like millions, tens of millions of people are watching the show. This is supposed to be the biggest show
it's
on
supposed
Amazon
to be like
Prime.
Game of Thrones.
Reacher on Amazon Prime, the numbers for Reacher is crushing Rings of Power. Crushing Rings of Power as far as likability, watchability, and the numbers that people are actually watching it. Like, people don't like this show. The people who say they like it are passive watchers that are just kind of apologizing for it, or don't care about shows kind of in general. And they'll be like, I watched the first 2 episodes, I liked it, but they didn't actually finish the season. Like, those are the kind of people who say they like it. Because there's been 2 people, only like 2 or 3 people in my world that I've had conversations with about this that like this show. I'll be like, so what did you think about how season 1 ended? Right? Like, what do you think is going to come up for the rest of the season? They're like, oh, well, I don't really know the history of Middle Earth. I didn't really finish season 1 yet. And it's been out for like a year. And they're like, I didn't finish it. It's like, bro, people don't that say they like the show don't. They're just not interested.
If you like it, and it was the same with the Acolyte. It's like, all right, break it down.
Yeah. Tell us what's good about it.
Tell me what's good about it. Here's this piece of dialogue, break that down and
tell me what really gets you enjoyment out of it.
Right, exactly. Because fans do that all the time. Fans watch stuff and break it down and talk about it with their friends and talk about subtext and what this could mean and what that could mean and what
or how much like one line, like how much one line means to them. Like how much it spoke to them, how well it was written. You know what I mean?
Like in the original Lord of the Rings, Aragorn says to Gandalf the White as they're talking on an evening about Frodo. He says that I'm Frodo will be able to do it. And then Aragorn says Sam went with him. And Gandalf just says, oh, that's good. Yeah, that's really good.
Essentially, that's what he says. Yeah.
Right. And he just he's smiling about it. And we're like, why? And all you have to do is go backwards in time with his interactions with Frodo and Sam to understand what that meant, why he was happy about that, and that he knew that it meant more for the characters.
Yeah.
They didn't have to explain it to us.
But also the original trilogy does good payoff. So going to what another line Aragorn says, one of the most epic things that's said in Return of the King is at the end, all is done, the end of all things, but not really the end of all things. Really, it's the start of all things new for Middle Earth, right? Sauron is gone, and they're crowning the return of the king, and everyone, the hobbits freaking bow to him, and he says, my friends, you bow to no one.
Yeah.
It took 3 films to understand the journey and understand the trials and tribulations and the sweat and tears and blood they went to show the impact of that one line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If it were this show, they would have been like, because of all of the things that you did, the journey that you made, the way that you, you had friends and you lost friends, and climbing that mountain the way that you did, and fighting that spider that you told us about.
But you stayed loyal to all your friends.
And you stayed loyal, and then ultimately you guys succeeded. It would have been a lot.
So you bow to no one.
So you bowed to no one, my friend.
Yeah, it's freaking expositions, man.
It's incredible stuff. The original movie.
Trilogy is genius.
And we could talk about that. That's the thing about fandom.
That's not what we're talking about.
Listen, hold on. That's the thing about fandom. Good fandom and good stuff.
It's worth talking about.
It's worth talking about.
It's exciting to talk about.
It's exciting. Even movies that were made 20 years ago or whatever.
Over 20 years ago.
I mean, I'm rough number, but they're still worth talking about.
Yeah,
they're still worth enjoying. And unfortunately, the show, as much as it wants it, as much as it's clawing, grasping for that, right? That
magic,
that magic, that thing that is precious in the original trilogy. It's not going to get it.
They didn't have the right wizards who showed up in the writer's room for this show.
Yeah,
they don't have the right kind of magic, man.
I think I want to end with this. At least this show, this is a positive thing, is going to shed light back onto Peter Jackson's movies, and people will watch them again. Even if they already have the movies and they're just pulling their DVD copy out or going to HBO, going to Max and watching it off of Max, people will watch Peter Jackson's movies.
And the hope.
It almost happened again. I almost turned on Lord of the Rings again the other day.
I'm about to.
I almost did.
When we freaking finish in 2 weeks, when we finish the season, I'm gonna freaking turn on the extended editions. Now, so let me say this: the hope with that, what you're right saying, Joshua, is that it sheds light on it and people are watching it. The hope is that people who maybe have never watched it, but they're like, oh, this Rings of Power thing. I know Lord of the Rings is a big deal. I sort of enjoy. I was intrigued by Rings of Power on some freaking level. Who knows what that is? But some people will be. And so they're like, all right, I'm gonna watch the trilogy, right? And when they watch it, the hope is that they see the stark difference in quality, and then that they end up saying, wow, this is really good. That thing that I watched and I was intrigued by is actually really bad compared to this, right? And so the hope is that there is a contrast when newbies, essentially to the franchise, watch the Jackson trilogy, especially this younger generation who are like 13, 14, 15-year-olds who are just now getting into movie culture and watching the Jackson trilogy for the first time. They'll get it. I hope
they'll get it because I got it. I didn't watch it until later in life, and I'm no less of a fan because of that. Once you recognize the quality, once you recognize, because I was a harsh critic of the movies when I first watched them because I had just finished reading the books. And I
took that Christopher Tolkien approach, and you're like,
and I was looking at, and I was like, that I don't care for Frodo, and I don't care for this or that or whatever. And I look at him now, and I'm like, it's masterful work, dude. It's really incredible.
And
let's wrap it up. We got to wrap.
Say one more thing. I want to say
one more thing.
All right,
make it brief.
So people, that was a fart sound, Joshua. Don't fart right before my last point. There's a general principle when it comes to anything, but especially filmmaking and storytelling, is people remember how you made them feel, not what you tried to tell them, right?
Yeah.
Not what they're told.
That's good.
And when it comes to modern filmmaking, when it comes to the Rings of Power, it's freaking exposition and telling you stuff and trying to communicate all this. But ultimately, people are going to walk away from the show in the same way they walked away from the Jackson trilogy, remembering how it made them feel rather than what they were told in the show, right? Like the information, what they were told, the messaging. People won't remember all that. They'll just remember how it made them feel. This show predominantly, especially with fans, this show makes them feel bad. The show makes them feel frustrated. The show makes them feel bored. The show makes them feel sad, right? It's a big waste. And people will remember that as once the season is done. Contrasting that with the original trilogy, even if you forget like all the big points, you forget all the lines that we've reminisced on a little bit here. What you do is you walk away and you remember, I remember feeling a sense of adventure, a sense of like loss but gain. And it felt good. Like I felt good at the end of that show, that trilogy. People will always remember how they make you feel. So like when in doubt, aim for that. Aim for what's going to make fans and newbies of the IP feel good when they walk away. They don't have to remember the show and all the details. Just make them feel good and make them remember good feelings about your piece of work. And it seems like people don't understand or grasp that concept. That was my final point. I just wanted to get that out.
Good job.
Thanks.
You. And thank you for sticking around and watching, whether you're live or whether you watch the VOD, the playback.
I want to just point this out. She chatted a long time ago, but Lily Anna Vanderlyn, I've seen her on the chat before.
Glad to see you guys live on a Thursday.
She says, glad to see you live on a Thursday. Hey, we're going live
every Thursday.
We're going live a bunch now. I think we're live Monday. I'm live Tuesday at least. And then we're usually live again Thursday. And then we have our pre-recorded podcast that goes live most Fridays. So, you should. We're going live a lot. So make sure you check in most evenings, and we'll probably be live for a lot of them. Not all of them, but for a lot of them.
But
glad you were here. Yeah, absolutely.
Leave a comment. Tell us what you guys think of the Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings, any of these points that we've made, any thoughts that you guys have. We'd love to interact with you. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next week for the second to last episode of the Rings of Power by Amazon Prime. See ya.